My name is Alyssa Trent, and I used to believe that being wronged meant someone owed me justice. I thought if I just documented everything, waited long enough, and planned carefully enough, I could force my family to see how wrong they'd been. I was going to expose them. I was going to win. I had it all mapped out in my head for years. Then one Tuesday morning I stopped caring about any of that. It happened in a coffee shop in Portland, of all places. I was reading an article about a woman who'd left her toxic job and started a bookstore, and something shifted in me. The article didn't spend any time on the company that wronged her, or whether they'd face consequences. It just described her morning routine, how she arranged books, how she made coffee for customers, how good her life had become without them in it. That's when I realized I'd been so focused on building a case against my ex-husband and his mother that I hadn't actually been building anything for myself. Not really. I was just waiting for the perfect moment to prove them wrong, which meant I was still letting them define my life. The story I want to tell you isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when you stop fighting the people who hurt you and start building something genuinely good instead. Let me take you back to where this started. The engagement party where Marjorie, my mother-in-law, announced to 40 people that I was infertile. I remember standing frozen by the appetizer table, my wine glass trembling, as she performed this elaborate monologue about her poor son who deserved grandchildren but was married to someone who just couldn't give him any. The laughter that followed was the worst part. Not cruel laughter, worse. It was sympathetic laughter. The kind people use when they're deciding you're broken. My husband Evan looked at the floor. He didn't say anything. He didn't take my hand. He just stood there, letting his mother reshape my entire identity in front of everyone we knew. I left the party early, claiming a headache. But it wasn't a headache. It was the moment I understood that my marriage had a fundamental problem. And it wasn't just Marjorie. It was Evan's silence. It was his willingness to let me be humiliated rather than stand up to his mother. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene, imagining what I should have said, what I should have done. By 3 a.m, I decided I was going to get revenge. I was going to document every cruel thing his mother said, every time Evan failed to defend me, and I was going to expose them both publicly. I'd make them understand how wrong they'd been. I started a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. The next few weeks were difficult. Marjorie called constantly with new cruelties disguised as concern. Have you considered adoption, dear? It might be easier than constantly disappointing Evan. I recorded the calls. Screenshots. Evidence. I went to a doctor and got tested for fertility. Perfectly normal results. When I asked about Evan's testing, the doctor hesitated but eventually confirmed he'd been tested there a year prior. My heart dropped. He'd known. He'd been tested and never told me, then let his mother publicly shame me for something he couldn't give her either. When I confronted him, he got defensive. You snooped through my private medical information, he said. As if that was the violation here. As if his secret infertility was somehow worse than his willingness to let me be publicly blamed for both of our situations. He refused to address it seriously. He cycled through denial, anger, and then something worse. Asking me to keep it quiet. It would embarrass Mom, he said. As if his mother's comfort was more important than our marriage's foundation. I added more to my evidence folder. Text messages. Screenshots of his gaslighting. Emails from Marjorie. I became obsessed with building an airtight case. I imagined the confrontation. I imagined showing it all to mutual friends and family. I imagined his face when everyone knew the truth. I imagined his shame being public, undeniable, permanent. 3 months into this obsession, I noticed something. I wasn't sleeping well. I was anxious constantly. I'd check my phone compulsively, hoping for messages that would give me more evidence. I'd replay conversations, looking for hidden meaning, looking for ammunition. One day at work, my colleague Marcus asked if I was okay. I gave the standard response, work stress, personal stuff, but he kept looking at me. You seem like you're carrying something heavy, he said. You don't have to tell me, but I hope you know you don't have to carry it alone. That small kindness broke something in me. I went to the bathroom and cried. Not from sadness but from exhaustion. The exhaustion of holding on to anger for months, of planning a perfect exposure, of keeping track of every slight. That night I did something different. Instead of opening my evidence folder, I made a different list. Not evidence against Evan and Marjorie. A list of things I actually wanted in my life. A good marriage where I felt protected. Friends who checked on me. Work that felt meaningful. Hobbies. Peace. Then I looked at my evidence folder and had an honest thought. Even if I expose them perfectly, even if everyone agrees they're wrong, will any of that give me what I actually want? The answer was no. I decided to separate from Evan before I did anything with my evidence folder. I wanted to leave while I still respected myself. I wanted to leave for me, not as part of some larger plan. I didn't announce it dramatically. I didn't threaten him with the evidence I had. I simply said, I don't think this marriage is working. I'm going to move out. I'd like to do this amicably, but I'm doing it either way. And then I found an apartment. Evan was shocked. He clearly expected me to fight. He expected drama, tears, negotiation. Instead, I was just quiet and clear. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Marjorie called immediately after he told her. I let it go to voicemail. I deleted the message without listening. And then, this was the important part, I deleted my evidence folder. Not because I was forgiving them. Not because they deserved forgiveness. But because holding on to that evidence meant holding on to them. It meant they were still the center of my attention, still the focus of my energy. I was still defining myself in opposition to them rather than in favor of myself. I wanted to be free from them, which meant truly free. Not free in the sense of getting revenge, but free in the sense of them mattering less and less every day. My apartment was small and sparse at first. I'd taken only what was mine, my books, my clothes, some dishes. Everything else stayed with Evan. I didn't fight for possessions or money beyond what felt fair. I was trying to build a life where things didn't matter as much as peace. The first weeks were lonely. I'd get home from work and have no one to talk to except myself. But I also had something I hadn't had in years, silence. Not the silence of being ignored by my husband, but actual peaceful silence. I could think. I could breathe. I could exist without constantly monitoring someone else's needs or emotions. I started small. I took a pottery class on Thursday nights because I'd always wanted to try it. I joined a book club. I meal prepped on Sundays so I wouldn't be exhausted on weekdays. I went to bed earlier. I took walks without my phone. These weren't revolutionary things. They were just normal things. But they felt revolutionary because they were entirely for me, with no obligation to perform for anyone or justify my choices to a critic. Marcus from work sometimes ate lunch with me. He never asked about Evan or the divorce details. He just listened when I wanted to talk and let me be quiet when I didn't. He was kind in the way people are kind when they're not trying to fix you or get something from you. He was just present. The divorce proceedings were straightforward because I didn't fight. Evan wanted the house. He could have it. Marjorie could enjoy being his mother forever. That was his choice. I took some savings which I was entitled to and started fresh. 6 months after leaving, I was surprised to find myself genuinely happy. Not the manic happiness of someone who just won a fight, but the quiet happiness of someone building something real. I had routines that felt good. I had time to think. I had space. My therapist, I'd finally started seeing one, asked me one day, "Do you ever think about what happened with Evan and his mother?" I realized I didn't think about them much anymore. When I did, it was just factually. They existed. They were probably dealing with their own stuff. I genuinely didn't care anymore what they were doing, or whether they'd face consequences. This surprised me. I'd spent months convinced that my happiness depended on them understanding how wrong they'd been. But it turned out my happiness depended on them mattering less to me. It depended on me mattering more to me. 9 months into my new life, Marcus asked me out properly. Not like colleagues having lunch, but a real date. I almost said no because I worried it seemed too convenient. But then I thought, why should I let fear stop me from something good just because I'd been hurt before? We went to dinner. It was nice. He was interested in what I thought about things. He didn't assume he knew me. He asked questions and actually listened. When I mentioned something from my past with Evan, he didn't make it a big deal. He just acknowledged it and moved on, which is what I wanted, acknowledgement, not analysis. We dated slowly. No rushing into anything. No merging finances immediately or moving in together quickly. We just spent time together and saw if it was actually good or just seemed good because we were both lonely. It was actually good. A year after I left Evan, I was at a grocery store when I ran into someone from the old friend group. Sarah, who'd been at that engagement party where Marjorie made her announcement. Sarah looked uncomfortable seeing me, which told me what I needed to know. Marjorie had spent the year positioning herself as the victim of my abandonment and my selfishness. I could have corrected her. I could have said, "Actually, your information is incomplete." I could have pulled up my phone and shown her the evidence I'd kept before deleting it. Instead, I just said, "It was a difficult situation. I'm much happier now," and meant it genuinely. Sarah looked surprised by my calm. I think she expected me to be angry or defensive. People often expect you to be as obsessed with conflicts as they are. When you're not, it's unsettling for them. I didn't contact Evan. I didn't reach out to Marjorie to see if she'd changed her mind or faced consequences. I didn't check what they were doing through mutual friends. I just lived my life and let them live theirs. 18 months after the separation, I found out through an accidental text to Marcus's phone, from Evan who'd gotten the wrong number, that Marjorie was sick. Apparently she'd been asking about me, wanting to make amends. The message implied she was dying or at least wanted me to think she was. Part of me, the part that had spent months building an evidence folder, felt a surge of vindication. She deserved to die knowing she'd been wrong. She deserved to regret what she'd done. Then I realized that part of me was still connected to her. I was still letting her matter. If I went to see her to forgive her or to accept her late apology, I was still making her the center of my story. So I didn't go. I didn't respond to the message. I let Evan handle it. Her illness, her redemption arc, her deathbed apologies. Those were her story now, not mine. It took a lot of self-awareness to do that without guilt. But I realized guilt would just be another way of keeping her important to me. And I was done with that. 2 years after leaving, Marcus and I moved in together. Not because we had to, but because it made sense. We wanted to see each other more. We wanted to build something together. We were thoughtful about it, discussing finances and expectations beforehand, which is what I should have done with Evan from the start. Marcus had his own apartment he owned, so we stayed there rather than me uprooting again. He had built a good life before I met him, and I respected that. I had built a good life too. Now we were just combining them carefully. My therapist pointed out one day that I'd shifted from defining myself against my ex-family to defining myself with Marcus in a healthy way. Not dependent. Not merged. Just partnered. There's a difference. I still took my pottery class. I still had my book club. I still kept routines that were just mine. Marcus had his hiking group and his friends. We came together from lives that were already good, not from the need to complete each other. 3 years after leaving Evan, I was promoted at work. Not because of anything dramatic, but because I'd become really good at my job. When you're not emotionally exhausted from fighting your family, you have energy for things like professional growth. I'd also started volunteering at a community center teaching pottery to people who couldn't afford classes. I loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about helping someone create something with their hands, to see their face when they realized they could do it. I ran into Marcus's friend Derek at a coffee shop, and he asked how I'd been. Derek had been at that engagement party too. "I heard your mother-in-law faced some kind of professional consequence," he said. "Something about her charity work being investigated. Is that true?" I said I didn't know and honestly didn't. I explained that I didn't keep track of that side of my life anymore. Derek seemed almost disappointed, like he'd expected me to have followed their drama, to have been secretly tracking their downfall. "Don't you want justice?" he asked. I thought about that question carefully. "I got justice," I said. "I got my life back. That's enough." For years after leaving, I found out I was pregnant. Not because I'd been trying. I'd actually thought I might not be able to have kids, given how everything had played out. But I was. Marcus and I looked at each other with surprise and then joy. We'd been happy without kids. Kids would just add to something already good. I didn't tell Evan. I didn't tell Marjorie, who was apparently still alive despite the death rumors. There was no confrontation scene where I'd reveal the pregnancy to prove Marjorie wrong. There was just Marcus and me in our apartment planning what it would mean to be parents. When my own mother found out, she asked if I was going to tell Evan. I said, "He'll probably find out eventually, but it doesn't change anything. This baby is Marcus's and mine. Evan's part of my past." That's okay. My mother looks sad about that. She wanted there to be more drama, more reconciliation, more of a story. But life doesn't always give you the story you want. Sometimes you just get the life you actually build. 5 years after leaving, I gave birth to a daughter named Claire. She was small and perfect and completely uninterested in my complicated family history. She just wanted to eat and sleep and be held. Marjorie sent a card. A generic one without much message. Evan sent flowers and a card with a note saying he hoped I was happy. I appreciated that he was trying, but I also didn't need anything from either of them. My life was complete without their approval or redemption. I brought Claire home and showed her the apartment that Marcus and I had created together. Not a palace. Not something designed to impress anyone. Just a good place where we loved each other, and where this small person would grow up knowing she mattered. 6 years after leaving, I did something that would have horrified the version of me who had an evidence folder. I sent Evan a text. Not angry, not sarcastic. Just clear. I wanted to tell you that I'm doing well. I'm happy. I hope you are too. I don't need anything from you, but I also don't need to hate you anymore. Take care of yourself. He responded hours later. I'm glad you're happy. I've been in therapy trying to understand why I let my mother treat you that way. It was cowardly. I'm sorry. I read that and felt nothing. Not forgiveness exactly, but not anger either. Just a neutral acknowledgement that people do the best they can with what they know, and when they know better, hopefully they do better. I didn't need to be the one to teach him that lesson. That was his work to do. I didn't respond. Not because I was being cold, but because a response wasn't necessary. I'd released him by releasing the need for him to understand or apologize or face consequences. That was freedom. 7 years later, I ran into Marjorie at the grocery store. It was unavoidable. She was reaching for the same olive oil I was. For a moment we both froze. She looked older. Actually old in a way that made me realize she wasn't the monster in my mind anymore. She was just a woman who'd made bad choices and was getting old. Alyssa, she said carefully, I've wanted to apologize for years. I set down my olive oil. I know you have. That's good. I hope that helps you feel better. I wasn't being cruel. I was just accurate. Her apology was for her, not for me. That was fine. She was allowed to make amends. I was allowed to have moved past needing to receive it. I heard you had a daughter, she said. I did. I do. She's beautiful and happy. I'd like to, Marjorie started. I don't think that's a good idea, I said gently. Not because I'm angry. Just because my daughter gets to know people who are good for her life. That's not a reflection on you. That's just how I parent. Marjorie looked sad but seemed to understand. She nodded and moved down the aisle. I finished my shopping and went home to Marcus and Claire, who were making dinner together in the kitchen. 8 years after leaving, I got a call from Evan. His mother had died. He wanted to tell me before I heard it somewhere else. I listened to him talk about the funeral plans and how he was feeling. I was kind but distant, the way you are with people who were once close but aren't anymore. I know you probably won't want to come, he said. No, I won't, I agreed. But I'm sorry you're going through this. And I meant it. I didn't have to hate Marjorie or Evan or wish them ill anymore. They were just people who'd hurt me years ago and were now dealing with their own lives and deaths. That was enough. After we hung up, I thought about what I would have done if I'd gone through with my revenge plan. I would have spent years building a case, planning an exposure, waiting for the perfect moment. Then she'd die and I'd feel. What? Unsatisfied? Guilty? Empty? Instead, I'd spent those 8 years building a good life. I'd created a marriage based on respect. I'd become a good parent. I'd developed friendships. I'd grown professionally. I'd learned who I was when I wasn't defined against people who hurt me. That was infinitely better than any revenge could have been. 10 years after that night at the engagement party, I was sitting at home with Marcus and Claire, who was now 9 years old and in 4th grade. We were looking through old photos of our family, just us, nothing connected to my past. Claire asked, Mom, why do you never talk about your old family? I've been waiting for this question. Because they're not part of my story anymore. I was part of their story for a while, but then I decided to write my own instead. That makes sense, Claire said, which is the beautiful thing about children. They accept your choices without needing you to justify them endlessly. Marcus squeezed my hand. He knew the whole history. He knew how close I'd come to spending a decade consumed with revenge. He also knew what I'd chosen instead. 15 years later, I still think about that engagement party sometimes. Not with anger anymore. Just with a strange kind of gratitude. Because the humiliation, as painful as it was, forced me to make a choice. I could spend my life fighting people who'd never give me what I needed. Or I could build a life where I didn't need it from them anymore. I chose the second thing. My marriage to Marcus is quiet and good. We fight sometimes, but we fight like people who actually want to work things out. Claire is a kind kid who knows she's valued. We're not perfect, but we're real. We're genuinely happy, which is better than any revenge narrative could make you. I never exposed Evan's infertility. I never orchestrated a confrontation. I never made his mother face public consequences. And somehow, I'm not less free because of it. I'm more free. I'm free because I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not planning anymore. I'm just living. I write sometimes now, nothing published, just for myself. I will write about what I learned from that time. Mostly I write this, revenge feels like justice, but it's actually just staying connected to the people who hurt you. Real freedom looks like indifference. Not bitterness, but genuine not caring what they think or do. It looks like a Tuesday morning where you don't think about them at all. It looks like being so focused on your own good life that their bad choices barely register. It looks like moving forward so completely that the past becomes just history, not an active wound. When people ask me now what happened with my family, I say, we didn't work out. I'm glad I left. That's all that matters. They often seem disappointed that there's no dramatic story, no exposure, no comeuppance. But the boring truth that I just left and built something good, that's the actual ending. Marcus sometimes says that marrying me was like adding an already complete sentence to his life. Not completing him, just happening alongside his life. That's how I think good relationships work. Two people with good lives who choose to make them better together. I think about the version of me that kept that evidence folder, and I feel compassion for her. She was hurt and traumatized and trying to make sense of a betrayal by creating a narrative where at least she'd win eventually. That made sense. That was a logical response to injustice. But it was also exhausting. And it would have kept me attached to people I needed to disconnect from. Claire's in high school now, and sometimes she brings friends over. One of them mentioned her parents were going through a divorce, and she seemed really upset about it. Claire said, my dad, Marcus is my dad. He and my mom seem really happy. So at least you know people can figure it out. I heard that and realized Claire didn't see her childhood as defined by my divorce from Evan. She saw it as a story where her mom left a bad situation and built a good life. That was the legacy I wanted to leave. Not a story about how I'd orchestrated someone's downfall. I ran into a woman at my pottery class who was going through a divorce. She was tracking every cruel thing her ex-husband had done, gathering evidence, planning how to expose him. I recognized myself immediately. Can I tell you something? I asked her. I did that once. I spent months building a case. I was going to make him regret everything. She leaned forward. Did you do it? Did you expose him? No, I said. I decided my life was too valuable to spend on revenge. I left and built something good instead. But don't you think he should face consequences? She asked. Maybe, I said. But I realized that waiting for him to face them was just keeping me stuck. So I stopped waiting and started building. She looked unconvinced, but I wasn't trying to convince her. I was just offering her a different way to think about it if she ever got tired of carrying anger. At Claire's high school graduation, I thought about how far we'd come. Not just in years, but in the way we think about conflict. Claire is someone who can stand up for herself without needing to destroy the other person. She's learned that from watching Marcus and me handle hard things with respect. I couldn't have given her that example if I'd spent her childhood orchestrating revenge. I gave her something better. A model of someone who knew when to leave, how to build something new, and how to move forward without needing the past to validate her choices. Today, 15 years after that engagement party, I'm sitting on the porch with Marcus. It's a regular Tuesday. Nothing dramatic is happening. No confrontations, no exposures, no comeuppance for anyone. Just a woman who was hurt, who chose to leave, who built a genuinely good life. People ask me sometimes if I regret not fighting back harder, not making my family understand, not getting revenge. And I always answer the same way. My life is genuinely good. That's my answer. Not because I won against anyone, but because I invested in myself instead of investing in their downfall. That was the best revenge of all. The quiet victory of a life well lived. And I'm still building it.